Lone Roger here, and I just wanted to do something very brief, just talking about um, basically public discourse and how it's gone downhill faster than you can hear the wind whistle through your teeth. So I was at work this morning, and they had on the radio, and the radio announcer was talking about I guess, the Tony Awards, and apparently Robert De Niro's big contribution to the evening was he got up there and he basically said, "F Trump." And I'm sitting here and I'm like, really? I was kind of flabbergasted at first. I guess I shouldn't be surprised because this is kind of where our political discourse has been going for a while. Um, but, one of the reasons I guess I am kind of surprised is that one of the biggest criticisms a lot of people like De Niro have of Trump is they take issue with his brusque manner of speaking and the things that he said that some people find offensive. And in fact, a lot of these people who themselves turn around and act in much the same way that they're arguing the president does, it's just illustrative of a large hypocrisy. But more importantly, it's kind of like, well, okay, whether the president is or isn't how you characterize him, the point is, what about you? What do you represent? And somebody like De Niro, he's a talented actor. He's worked very hard to get where he is. Um, and you know what? It's kind of funny, but as far as I'm concerned, he kind of pissed all that away last night. Like I'm really, I have no desire to see any of his movies going forward. If I'm gonna see one of his movies, I'm gonna like wait till it comes out on DVD and get it from the town library where I don't actually have to pay for it and where he's not going to get any revenue from me checking it out and watching it. Unlike, let's say, renting it from, well, I'm old enough to remember when you could rent movies from Blockbuster. I don't think they have those anymore, but getting it on Netflix or something, the people involved get a royalty for it. And obviously, if you go to the movies and you pay to see it at the theater, you know, um, you have to pay an awful lot to get into the theater these days, and of course, he's getting that revenue. And why would I want to support somebody who acts like that, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I curse the site a lot more than I should probably, but I make an effort not to do so. Um, but more to the point, I don't friggin' curse in certain things. If I'm at work or I'm out in public or the the example that comes to my mind as a cyclist was you know going to a lot of the meetings advocating for mountain bike access. Um, and a lot of stuff. I mean, there were times when we were at some of these public meetings, and you'd have a bunch of anti-bike agitators get up there and say all kinds of things about us, try to cast us in the worst possible light. And this wasn't just like reading somebody's Twitter comments or somebody posts a nasty remark online. This was, you know, this like a line of 10 people over there standing about, 5 feet away, and they're right there in the flesh, and they're all standing up, and they're not just saying they don't think you should be allowed to mountain bike at that particular park. They're impugning your character, they're impugning your morals, they're saying you're a bad person, they're saying you're evil, that you're a lawbreaker at heart, blah, 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 all of this crap. And you're sitting there and you're like, uh, is this going to be over soon? Because I'm getting kind of pissed. Right? And it was very difficult to maintain decorum at some of these meetings. But we did it. There was not a single mountain bike advocate that had to be dragged away from the microphone by the police. There were several anti-bike agitators who got up there and went on and on and on, and they went over the time limit. They wouldn't let other people speak and take the microphone. They got very belligerent. One person said like he'd attack any biker he saw on the trail, etc. And ultimately, several of these people did have to get hauled away from the microphone for whatever reason, basically, um, because they went overboard. They weren't maintaining decorum. Now, if you're at home or with your friends, maybe that's fine. You go on a rant, you bitch about something, you curse a little bit, you call somebody an a-hole, whatever. And you know what? Like, you're with your friends, you're at home, you're You know, even if you're out in public, I mean, you're at you're at a diner and there's a TV over the counter and a politician you don't like comes on a TV, and you say to your friend, "Hey, that guy's an asshole," or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's in public, but it's not like you're broadcasting it. This isn't the Tony Awards, all right? Um, and that I think is, the question isn't, do you agree with De Niro about Trump, or do you not agree with him about Trump? Do you like Trump? Do you not like Trump? Trump, I think, is irrelevant to this question, except for the hypocrisy aspect of it. Um, the only real thing we have to look at here is, how did this person act? And I hearken back to an incident that happened in my youth. I was a teenager. I was in high school. And there was I don't know, it was the assault weapons ban or something else, but I was never a big supporter of gun control, even back then. Of course, everything I've learned about it since, I'm less likely to support it. But even back then, I did not support it. And I remember I was watching the news one night at home. A friend of mine was over at the house. So it was my friend, myself, and my father. We're watching the news on the TV in the living room. And on the TV, there comes this announcement that this law, whatever the law was, it may have been the assault weapons ban, I don't remember, but that this law was enacted, that it was passed into law, by the Congress. And my response was, I remember I sat up in my chair and I said, F no, really loud or something like that. And then I went off for like a sentence or two, gosh darn politicians, blah, blah, blah. And I remember my dad's like, what did you say? And I said, what, Dad, I mean, look what they did. They just passed this law. This is incipient injustice. You know what's going to happen? And my dad said to me, I don't care what they did. I care about what you do. Now, this may sound kind of anachronistic in a world like this, the way things are now, 20 years later, but it still holds true, what he said. It does matter what you do. It does matter how you conduct yourself. And how you conduct yourself at a freeholder meeting that's being written down by a stenographer, where there's members of the public present, where you're representing your side in a debate, or where, the meeting's being videotaped and it's going to be on the local news and on TV. And how you conduct yourself in that type of a situation is different than how you might conduct yourself in a bar room or at home or just hanging out with friends. And it does matter, At the time, I kind of got a little ticked at my dad. I said, Dad, I mean, you're sitting here, you're worried about my language, and look what these people did. I mean, they passed an unjust law. And my dad goes, again, I'm not talking about what they did. I'm talking about what you do and how you act. And again, at the time, I thought he just couldn't see the big picture, and he was just annoyed by my language and focusing on that because he wasn't considering the issue of the unjust law. 20 years later, I'm looking back at it, and I realize he was right. Whatever it is they're doing is no reason for me to act like an asshat, okay? You can be upset about a politician or about an issue of the day or about something somebody else did or said or whatever. But that's no excuse for you basically to behave as if you have a screw loose, all right? And it's disingenuous to blame the other person for your reaction and then how you therefore conduct yourself. Whatever you think about President Trump, whether you like him, don't like him, whatever, has nothing to do with Robert De Niro, okay? Trump doesn't control Robert De Niro. You know who controls Robert De Niro? Robert De Niro, okay? And in the most basic sense, when you open your mouth, what comes out, that's all you, okay? So, to even talk about it in terms of Trump or his policies or his language or whatever, you're missing the point, okay? You're missing the point. The issue is, how did we as a culture in a country here in the United States get to the situation where a big name in the movie business, somebody like Robert De Niro, where he thinks it's appropriate to get up there and say things like this. And this isn't the first time. I mean, he said, I think when Trump was running for office, he said something like he'd like to punch him in the face and blah blah blah. And we know people have said contentious things like this before about other political figures, and it's not. There are some people you either just really like them or you don't like them, and they get a visceral emotional reaction. Whatever, that's fine. You know, that's a little different. Him making some statement to a friend and it gets written down and somebody tells a reporter, or even if he flat out just tells a reporter, that's one thing. But we're talking here about at the Tony Awards, okay, at a nationally televised award ceremony. Why would any grown adult human think that this was an appropriate situation and context to act in this manner? Whether you like Trump or not is irrelevant. That, I think, is the thing we're getting at. And the only way that it even has anything to do with Trump, even like remotely, is when you look at the fact that people like De Niro, who really, really hate him, one of the things they criticize him for is his language and his decorum, or lack thereof, as they would point out. I'm not going to get into that. Again, do you like the way the president talks? Do you not like what he says or how he says it? It is almost irrelevant, except for the hypocrisy aspect. That, wait a minute, one of the reasons you have for not liking the president and for opposing him is because of how you say he's lowered our discourse in this country, whether that's true or not. So your response is to further lower the discourse? Like, I'm getting a very strong, pot calling the kettle vibe here. And the thing that bothers me is not that a grown man who was sober, I mean, this previously would be the type of conduct you'd expect from somebody who had like 5 too many drinks and just, went off at like, the guy who gets up there at the wedding and just starts telling everybody off because he's drunk. That literally used to be the role that you look to for this type of behavior. Now, apparently, it's considered the respectable thing to do, or at least these folk think it is. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, like, how did we get to this point, and how do we pull ourselves up out of this pit? And it just is worth noting that there is an element of hypocrisy when people like this, say, "Well, I'm just doing it because I don't like Trump." Why don't you like Trump? Well, because he's rude. Dude, did you listen to what you said? And I keep going back to that example my father gave, where even if someone flat out passes an unjust law, that's still no excuse for you to act like an asshat, for you to act like you have a screw loose. How you conduct yourself matters. All right, never mind what that person's doing. And I think that we forget that. And I don't know if it's because people just figure, well, they're rich and they're wealthy and everybody listens to them because they're a movie star, so they can just do whatever they want and whatever. I don't know. But what bothers me, I guess, about this is that they justify this kind of conduct by then turning around and saying, well, it's the president's fault. Look what he's done to lower public discourse. Yeah, well, you're not helping. I mean, if that's what you really think of the president, then how is this your response? And again, whatever somebody else may or may not have done, that has nothing to do with what you do and how you conduct yourself and what kind of person you are, okay? And I'm going to be honest, De Niro's a talented actor. I've seen plenty of his movies. I'm not sure I'm going to see that many of them going forward. And, on one hand, that's, what happens. If you're a public figure and you think you're going to, your livelihood is connected to not pissing off too many of your fans. But even beyond that, there's the issue of being a public figure, being somebody in the culture, in the entertainment industry, involved in the arts, essentially. I guess we could consider movie making an art. It's definitely something creative. these people and what they say and what they do has a much greater impact than what you or I might say or do. They have greater access to an audience. They carry more weight. They play a bigger role. And my problem is not just that, well, okay, he's an arsehole, so I won't watch any of his movies. My problem is, what type of example does this set for the culture going forward? Because it's not just that this one person, for whatever reason, thought that it would be appropriate to get up at an award ceremony and say, F the president, with all the hypocrisy that entails, including the fact that one of the things him and people like him don't like about the president is supposedly, his language and his decorum. Well, then what are you doing? It's worse than that. It's that rather than look at him like, what the hell's wrong with that guy? Or, did he like start in on the punch bowl early? Or, hey, maybe somebody put something in his Coke or, whatever. No, there was no expressions of incredulity or shock or, oh my God, what's wrong with him? Or like, did that guy really say that? You know what there was? There was a standing ovation from other mainstream cultural figures in attendance. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, it's a free country. They can say whatever they want. He can say whatever he wants. But the rest of us are also free to do what his peers wouldn't and look at him and say, what the hell is wrong with you, man? All right? Seriously. And I know that in contentious political debates, sometimes it's hard to keep your temper. Again, the example of going to those mountain bike meetings for cycling access and having to stand there and keep a straight face and not, insult the people on the rostrum while they were busy, ripping out my soul and splashing it with a new coat of dark paint. But this wasn't a question of De Niro lost his temper, that he was sitting there at a public meeting listening to people berate him and his friends and people like him. Now, this is a question of he made a conscious, deliberate decision to do this. And I don't know if this was just a stunt to get some publicity for his next movie, hopefully stopping short of enough publicity to lose fans, or if this was just like a show of solidarity with other people who have the same political views and the same lack of manners, or if he was just trying to appeal to the young and hip who want things a little more edgy. I honestly don't know why he did this. But obviously, the only thing I know is that he did it, and from the fact that he did it, that he obviously thought it was an appropriate way to act at an award ceremony. And that all the other people there who applauded this also thought that it was not only an appropriate way to act, not only conduct that they should condone, but that it was in fact praiseworthy and worthy of a standing ovation. When we get to the point in this country that the leading cultural exponents, the people in the arts, in the movies, in the media, the people that shape the views that many other people have, and the way that discussions go and things are seen, when we get to the point that those people think that saying F the president at the top of your lungs at an award ceremony is something profound and worthy of a standing ovation, we're in trouble, people. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether you like the president or hate the president, or whether it's about this. It's not about Trump, okay? It's about this. It's about how did we get to this point that not only a grown-ass man who's apparently completely sober and not under the influence thought this was an appropriate way to conduct himself, but that everybody else present, or nearly everybody else, also thought that it was such a profundity that it was worthy of a standing ovation, like he just delivered the Gettysburg Address. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, I honestly think maybe they're overestimating it. Maybe they're overestimating their cultural impact. Maybe they, it may just be, they surrounded themselves and they're surrounded by people who have similar views. And everybody I know thinks that this is, an appropriate way to act because they just really don't like the president. And that's all they care about. And so, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? Then I got news for you, because there are people all across the political spectrum, even people who might in their own home or amongst their friends, or when they're out having a drink at the bar, or a cup of coffee at the diner, or walking in the park, may say to themselves or their friends or their family, "Oh, I think that so and so is an asshole," or "F so and so." They may indeed say that. And they may indeed share your opinion of that politician, whoever that is, the president, the mayor, the governor, whomever. But I'm going to be honest, I know people who really don't like Trump. And you know what? They don't think this type of thing is appropriate, because it's not about Trump. It's about you and how you conduct yourself and where a country's going. And a lot of the reasons that a lot of people say they don't like Trump has to do with what they argue is him lowering the standard of public discourse. I'm not going to get into whether I agree with that or not, or anything like that, because again, it's not about Trump. It's about these people. It's just worth to note the hypocrisy. Okay, you don't like Trump because you say he's uncouth. Did you listen to what you just said? Yeah, exactly. And I guess, my reaction now is the same as the reaction I had early this morning when I heard it on the radio, which is, what the hell is wrong with these people? Like, did they all start in early on the punch bowl? Were they all plastered when this happened, and that's why they went along with it and applauded? Or do they really believe not only, that, I could see, it's generally conceived that certain segments of the country have certain political views, and there's a belief, rightly or wrongly, I'm not going to get into that either, but there's a belief that the entertainment industry tends to be to the political left. Okay, fair enough. So I could see a lot of these people agreeing with De Niro in his dislike for Trump, or, anybody really who's, not to the left of, like, Trotsky. Here's the thing. It's one thing to agree with a person's, political views. It's another thing to agree with that type of conduct at an awards ceremony. All right? Imagine you went to your son or daughter's high school or even college graduation. Now, it's well known that sometimes they get speakers to come to these things who are political figures and who oftentimes wander into political discourse while they're, and sometimes even campaigning for themselves while they're giving the commencement speech. I saw this. I went to the college graduation of a young woman I knew some years ago, and I think it was Governor McGreevey at the time here in New Jersey, came and made the speech. And it wasn't a very engaging speech. He was kind of like a wooden Indian. But worse, he was like politicking the whole time, like talking about his proposals, and it wasn't really a commencement speech, it was a campaign speech. By contrast, Richie Sambora from the Bon Jovi's rock band was there. And he actually was a wonderfully engaging public speaker, probably because of all his experience, like performing in front of people. And he didn't get political at all. He just made a nice, speech filled with anecdotes. But the point is that, it's known that when you go to a college, or maybe even in some cases high school graduation, sometimes the speakers get political. However, if you went to your daughter or your son's college graduation and the commencement speaker opened the speech by saying, "F Trump," what would you think that's an appropriate thing for what's essentially an award ceremony? No. And guess what? It's not any more appropriate for this. So, he may have been figuring, and all these people who cheered along with him. I'm going to have to really really think long and hard about these people now. It may be that they figured they were just, this was about Trump, and they were sending a message about their displeasure with his administration or his mannerisms or personality or whatever. But I'm looking at it as what they said really says a hell of a lot more about them than it does about Trump. And the truth is, at the end of the day, like my father said in that example from 20 years ago, it doesn't matter what that person does, it matters what you do. And what these people did at the award ceremony, you can't excuse that by saying, well, Trump's a foul-mouthed so-and-so, whether he is or not. because no, it's on you. How you conduct yourself, that reflects on you. Okay. So, I mean, I have to seriously say, it's not just De Niro. It's all of these people at this event that were openly applauding. You know, and again, when you get to the point that the people who write books and the people who write movies and the people who write songs, the people who essentially shape the spirit and the soul of a culture, get to the point where they think shouting profanity at the top of your lungs is a profound statement worthy of a standing ovation at a public ceremony like this. Not only does it say a hell of a lot more about them than it says about Trump, what it says isn't very flattering. One rider out.